Antoine Winfield Jr. got the franchise tag, and that's a good thing. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this Wednesday episode of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listen to review every single day. Don't forget you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, you can follow along on Twitter. I am James Yarcho at JYarcho_Bucs, credentialed member of the media covering your Tampa Bay Buccaneers as deputy editor of SB Nation's BucsNation.com. Here with you every Monday through Friday, along with our everydayers. And for that, I want to share my appreciation for your continued support of the show. One of the ways you can support the show is become a Locked On Bucs insider. You're going to get news, rumors, updates, general thoughts, plus one-on-one conversations with me via text message. Become an insider by going to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs today. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. Mike Evans' contract is a great one for the Bucs this season. And should the Bucs bail on Baker in favor of Russell Wilson? That is coming up a little bit later. But first, let's start with the news from Tuesday that came out, of course, as soon as my son and I hit the highway on our way to Cleveland. And in fact, I just got home from Cleveland less than an hour ago, thus the delay in the episode. But that news was that Antoine Winfield Jr. got the franchise tag when a long-term deal couldn't be worked out ahead of the tag deadline. So I talked about this on Tuesday's episode, that the Bucs and Antoine Winfield Jr. were trying to get a long-term deal worked out. That was the word from Jeremy Fowler, among some other people, and that maybe if they got that deal done, they would be able to use that franchise tag on Baker Mayfield in order to work out a long-term deal with him without other people getting involved. Instead, it was Winfield that got the tag, much like we expected, something I have been talking about on the show for about a month. So the prediction is that Winfield's long-term deal will make him one of, if not the highest paid safety in the NFL at around $20 million a year on average. The franchise tag is going to guarantee him $17.123 million for 2024 if they don't get something worked out before the deadline, which is around mid-July for those that have the tag placed on them. Now, all expectations are that the long-term deal with Antoine Winfield Jr. will get done, and that this franchise tag is simply being used as a placeholder so that the Bucs can focus on locking up Baker Mayfield, potentially Lavonte David before free agency starts. And then they don't have to worry about any other team swooping in and snagging Antoine Winfield Jr. However, there is that possibility that Winfield ends up playing on the tag, which means he would hit free agency again next year. It is not a foregone conclusion that a long-term deal does get done. But given the reports about it being worked on up until the deadline on Tuesday, there does seem to be enough momentum that they will get something worked out, probably in that 4-year range, which of course would allow Winfield Jr. to cash in again before his age 30 season. The focus, as I mentioned, will now shift to Baker Mayfield and Lavonte David, as well as a few others that the Bucs want to bring back, and some guys from other teams that are hitting free agency that they want to go ahead and bring in. But the Bucs have until Monday at 4 o'clock before that open negotiating window opens up to get those deals done with the remaining top 2 free agents. The Bucs did bring back Devin Tompkins and Brandon Walton. They were exclusive rights free agents, so there really wasn't any risk of losing them, but they did get something worked out with them. So the Bucs still have their return guy, They still have some offensive line depth returning to the team, but there is still a lot of work to get done. After the Mike Evans and Antoine Winfield Jr. deals, I mean, I call Winfield's a deal, but after the tag was placed, the Bucs have somewhere in the range of $21 to $23 million in cap space, depending on where you look. I am going to go with the lower of the two, which comes from Over the Cap, which is another wonderful tool that you can use to check salary situations. So let's put it at $21 million in cap space. They can still free up $10 million more by releasing Russell Gage. And I talked earlier this week about the possibility of Carlton Davis getting traded. I still think it's very much in the cards that he gets released. So those two moves alone put the Bucs up over $35 million in cap space, allowing for the signings of Mayfield and David. Plus, a long-term deal with Winfield means that he's probably not going to count $17 million against the cap in 24. That frees up even more space. Then, of course, you have the restructuring abilities for guys like Vita Vea, Jamel Dean. You could sign Chris Godwin to an extension since he's entering a contract year and he counts $27.5 million against the cap in 24. You can bring that number down with a extension and some reshuffling of what gets allocated to the cap and when. There's a lot of maneuvering that the Buccaneers can do, but as it stands now, there's still plenty of cap space to work out those two remaining deals that the Bucs really need to get done by the end of the weekend in Baker Mayfield and Levante David. And again, I'm going to remind everyone, their per year pay or their average annual value of the contract is not what the salary cap hit is. We're going to talk about Mike Evans' contract coming up a little bit later, all the guaranteed money that he's getting versus the cap hit. So we always wait until those actual deals come out before getting into what kind of deals they really are. Baker can sign for $35 million a year on average, but that doesn't mean that the Bucs go over the salary cap, the $21 million that they have, because he's getting 35 a year. It's all about the guarantees, the structure of the signing bonus, and any potential void years that help alleviate the cap situation. So that's always something that's really important to keep in mind. Average annual value does not equal cap hit. Remember, Mike Evans' deal was 2 years, $52 million. There's 35 of it guaranteed, but that's an average annual value of $26 million. That is not what he's getting. That is not what counts against the salary cap. Jumping over to the chat real quick before we move on. We got Donald Bolton in the chat saying, watching live while at work, making the workday a little better. Just don't get caught by the boss. Don't get in any trouble. This show will still be here when you are done, but I'm glad to help your workday move along a little bit better. Donald also says, I'd rather bake with Baker than ride with Russell. We are going to get into that coming up in a little bit. G Vegas, this is actually a great point. I was going to bring this up in the next segment, but I can go ahead and touch on it now before we hit that break. G Vegas says in the chat, reportedly, Baker camp is asking $44 million a year while Bucs are offering 25. G Vegas says meet in the middle and go for 33. So right before I went live, Scott Reynolds of Pewter Report reported that the Bucs and Baker Mayfield's camp are about $20 million apart in their negotiations. Baker's reps came in asking for $44 million. The Bucs came in offering 25. This is not an alarming situation by any means. I agree with Scott Reynolds 100%. And please go check out the article that he did about it over on pewterreport.com, because he goes into a lot of depth that I will not get into on this episode. But this is how negotiations work. The reps of the player come in as high as humanly possible, trying to get the most for their client. The team is going to come in lower than what they're probably going to end up paying, trying to get the best deal they possibly can. You have Daniel Jones, who's getting up over $40 million a year. We all know that Baker is a better quarterback than Daniel Jones. So Baker's agents are trying to leverage that situation to get their client more money. The Bucs are saying, look, Baker just did what Geno Smith did, and he's getting $25 million a year. They're trying on this end. I do think that they're going to meet in the middle somewhere. However, being $20 million apart does not really lend itself to being conducive to getting a deal done by the weekend. But that doesn't mean that one phone call can't change everything on either side of the spectrum. But $20 million apart per year is a pretty large amount. Hopefully, they can come together in the middle and get something figured out. But we're going to talk about Baker Mayfield coming up in a little bit, and if the Buccaneers might be interested in going a different direction, that and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Get buckets on your first bet with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, futures bets, and more. Right now, the Boston Celtics are favorites to win the NBA Finals at plus 260, while defending champion Denver Nuggets are the favorites out of the Western Conference at plus 440. And FanDuel already has odds up for Super Bowl 59, where the San Francisco 49ers are the favorites at plus 500. The Kansas City Chiefs are plus 650 to go ahead and three-peat, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are tied with the New Orleans Saints, Las Vegas Raiders, Arizona Cardinals, and Seattle Seahawks at plus 7,500. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every single day. Every day, make sure you're coming back tomorrow. I will be joined by Evan Klosky. I'm sure he will have plenty to say about Mike Evans, Antoine Winfield Jr., and any potential updated news regarding Baker Mayfield. In the meantime, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. I do see Make It All Gaming in the chat saying there's a little lag. I apologize for that. My local internet decided to have an outage throughout the night, from what I understand, as they're working on some lines here. So hopefully my internet gets caught back up. In the meantime, though, the Denver Broncos have moved on from Russell Wilson. And I have seen some comments on the YouTube channel and on social media that the Bucs should forget about Baker and go after Wilson. Now, some Bucs fans want them to go that route because Russell Wilson is still a name that carries some weight and some star power. He is a Super Bowl champion. Some want them to go that route because they still hate Baker Mayfield, and that is never going to change no matter what he does. And some want them to go that route because of how cheap it will be in 2024. With Russell Wilson's release, he is still getting $39 million from the Broncos this season. So you can actually sign him for the league minimum, and he would still be making a ton of money. Now, any money in the contract that you give him will be deducted from that $39 million. So you could actually, or the Broncos could actually end up paying Russell Wilson less than the $39 million, but that is kind of what is going on now. I would expect Russell Wilson to get a prove-it deal for the league minimum and allow the Broncos to carry the weight of his payment. But here's the thing about Russell Wilson, and this is purely my own opinion. Feel free to disagree with me. I know a lot of you already do about a multitude of things, but the Buccaneers are better off with Baker Mayfield than they would be with Russell Wilson. And I believe that for a couple of reasons. First and foremost, the chemistry in that locker room, in the Bucs locker room, cannot be overlooked. And that team, both sides of the ball, offensive players, defensive players, loved Baker. The coaches loved Baker. Everybody in that building loved Baker. Russell Wilson isn't exactly known for being the most approachable player or one that teammates gravitate towards. He is very much a loner. He is very much a him first kind of player, and that grates on a lot of teammates' nerves. You don't have to go back very far to the interview that Marshawn Lynch gave about how no one in Seattle could get his number. Marshawn wanted to reach out to Wilson about something, and he had to call Wilson's reps. And then Wilson's reps passed the message along, and Russell Wilson called Marshawn from a blocked number. That's not really a great thing to have your quarterback doing. And that's a pretty stark contrast to someone like Tom Brady, who asked Jason Light for every player's phone number the moment that they decided he was going to be a Buccaneer. Second, Wilson hasn't been good in a few years. The last time he was on a winning team was 2020, and his last 2 years in Denver have been basically forgettable. He had barely over 3,000 passing yards last season, and while his touchdown to interception ratio was much, much better than it was in 2022, his yards per attempt were a career low last year. His yards per catch were a career low. His air yards per attempt were the second lowest of his career, second only to his first season in Denver. His sack percentage were the second and fourth worst of his career over the last 2 seasons. Say what you will about Sean Payton, and you all know that I have said plenty about Sean Payton over the course of my time hosting this show. But if he doesn't want you to be the quarterback running his offense, that in and of itself should be a red flag for just about any other team in the league, especially given that Denver would rather eat $35 million in 2024 and $50 million in 2025 in dead money against their salary cap, which cannot be lowered. They cannot alter that number. There's no finagling that can be done. They would rather spend $39 million in actual cash money this season than have Russell Wilson play for them. They are paying his salary to play for another team. That's how much they do not want him. You can even look at Dave Canales in Carolina, who worked with Russell Wilson, and he said that Carolina is, quote unquote, not the situation for Wilson. I get it to some extent. You just drafted a rookie quarterback with the number 1 pick last year, but he was arguably the worst quarterback in the entire league, and you're still rolling with him over even entertaining the idea of bringing in Russell Wilson. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it was the situation in Denver more than it was the player in Russell Wilson, and he ends up bouncing back to his all-pro, Pro Bowl caliber form next season for whatever team he plays for. But I just don't really see it. And I'm not saying that I've watched every game of his over the last 2 or 3 years, but what I did see when I was watching him was ugly. If a team is willing to pay you to go away to the level that the Broncos are doing with Russell Wilson, that just seems like someone you don't really want to bring in unless you are completely desperate. Now, that trade still wasn't the worst quarterback trade over the last couple of years. That distinction still goes to the Cleveland Browns and their deal for Deshaun Watson. But I just don't see the Bucs wanting to pursue Russell Wilson over Baker Mayfield. Now, of course, we can revisit this issue if Baker does not come back. If the Bucs can't get a deal done with Baker and he moves on, maybe there is an avenue where the Bucs are interested in another prove-it deal with a quarterback that has had success in the past and has struggled, and now they're paying pennies for a starting quarterback. But I still can't get past some of the things that we have heard from players that played with Russell Wilson in Seattle, from Marshawn Lynch to Richard Sherman, has been vocal about some things regarding Russell Wilson, as well as some others. He just doesn't quite seem like a player that they enjoyed playing with. And that's the quarterback. He is supposed to rally and galvanize everyone on both sides of the ball the way Baker Mayfield just did in Tampa last year. The guy that bounces around from position group to position group in the lunchroom, the guy that can go up to everyone and have a conversation, the guy that the team wants to rally around because they know how much he cares about the game and they know how much he cares about them. And to me, that does not seem like Russell Wilson. Real quick in the chat, we got G Vegas. He says that Wilson does throw a deep ball. You think this circumstance will make him try to write his football career, and you could sign him for $1.2 million and use the other cap space to bring in good players? Absolutely. There's no question about that. And I can see why people want to go down that avenue. But I think over the long term, even though you're saving the money, I don't think Russell Wilson is the right guy for this Buccaneers team. We got Mike in the chat that says Russ is washed up. I find it hard to disagree, but I'm going to leave the door slightly cracked that, again, maybe it was the situation and not the player. But again, if Sean Payton doesn't want you running his offense, I don't know if I want you running my offense either if I'm an NFL GM or a head coach. Divis Druid says Jenna Lane tweeted that a deal with Baker is quote unquote not done. Right, 100% it's not done. Earlier in the show, for those that have joined the live a little bit later, Scott Reynolds of Pewter Report reported that the Bucs and Baker Mayfield's agent are about $20 million apart in negotiations. Again, it's not panic time by any means, but I don't think we're going to be hearing news about a deal getting done between the two in the next couple of hours or anything. But of course, now that I say that, it'll get done as soon as I finish recording with Evan Klosky for tomorrow's episode, much like how the Mike Evans news came out about 10 minutes after Tuesday's episode went live on YouTube, or Monday's episode, whichever day. Monday's episode went live on YouTube, and then boom, Mike Evans had a deal done. But what does that deal look like? The details have emerged, and it's a great one for 2024. That is next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. Passion, drive, and patience, what brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, brake kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Wrapping things up here on a live Wednesday episode of Locked On Bucs. And all right, I said on yesterday's show that I would talk about Evans' contract once details emerge, and they have. I did have a wonderful person calling me all kinds of names in the YouTube comments yesterday because I talked about a year-to-year deal after this contract for Mike Evans, and he said that Evans signed a team-friendly deal and I should put respect on his name. First off, I have never disrespected Mike Evans, ever. Not on this show, not off the show, not off the record, not in my writing, ever. I have never disrespected Mike Evans. Second, I said that Evans may want a year-to-year approach after this deal, not the Bucs. And finally, this is not a team-friendly deal. This was Mike getting his, which is completely fine. Don't get me wrong. But there was no hometown discount here, so don't get it twisted. But with that all being said, Evans' deal, we know, was 2 years, $52 million, $35 million guaranteed, and $29 million guaranteed in the first year. Here is how it breaks down. Evans' base salary in 2024 is $1.2 million, and he has a cap hit of $5,568,000. His bonus is spread out over 5 years. So there's 3 void years tacked on. I did mention that I strongly believed that that was going to be the case. And he has a $4.358 million signing bonus designation for each of the next 5 years that go towards the salary cap. His base salary in 2025 is $18 million with a cap hit of $22,432,000. Now, obviously, the cap is going to go up again next year, and the Bucs could always work out another extension with him prior to 2025 if Evans gets through this year, has another great year, and they say, hey, if you want to keep going, let's tack another year onto this deal, and so on and so forth. And that $22.4 million cap hit can be lowered. I also mentioned earlier in the show that Chris Godwin is in a contract year now. So the Bucs may be looking to move on from him after the season. I would hope not, but it is possible. You have Wirfs needing an extension. Rachaad White is in a contract year. You have Baker's deal or whichever quarterback they go with. All of that money is going to go against the cap. But when you take a look at the 2025 salary cap situation for the Bucs, they have almost $100 million in cap space estimated for next season, but that's based off of this year's $255 million cap ceiling. So it's going to be even more than that. You have a lot of players that are not under contract for next year, and obviously that is going to play into it as well. Jason Light and Mike Greenberg, though, continue to be wizards at moving things around and shuffling the right numbers in order to maximize their cap situation. And yes, they borrow against future years, but by the time you're getting to 2026 and beyond, that $4.5 million will round up in dead cap from the bonus that Mike Evans is getting is such a minuscule amount that it's not even really going to matter. Even if the salary cap jumps 5% next year, that'll push the cap up to over $267 million. And the revenue keeps rising. TV deals keep getting bigger. Hate it, love it, hate it, be indifferent about it. The eyeballs that Taylor Swift brought to the NFL last season and bringing in a new wave of fans, there's already been estimations about how much revenue that alone has created for the NFL. So regardless of why new fans are watching, if it's Taylor Swift and then they stick around, it means big time dollars. So you have all of this happening and the salary cap keeps getting higher and higher and higher. That's why some of these deals, you take a look, if Baker gets $35 million a year and he counts for $45 million against the salary cap in 2026, that's not going to be as bad then as it seems now. So no, Mike Evans did not sign a team-friendly deal. He gets his $29 million guaranteed this season, but the structure of it means that the hit is minimal for the Bucs salary cap this season. Then, of course, there's the earning potential of an additional $17 million in incentive bonuses ranging across the board from receptions to yards to touchdowns to individual rank among NFL receivers in those categories. There's postseason benchmarks where he can earn more bonuses. It all adds up to more money from Evans. It's a great deal for Evans because he got his. He got his money. He got what he wanted. It's a great deal for the Bucs because they're keeping the face of their franchise, the guy that has been the face of the franchise for a decade. And it was phenomenal structure to give the Bucs wiggle room this season. You have two receivers adding up to over $30 million in cap hit this year between Godwin and Mike Evans. But when you break it all down, are there two receivers that are available in a combination with Evans that you would rather have than that? Is there a combination that you would rather have moving forward? I would venture to guess probably not. And if Baker or whoever the quarterback is able to utilize Godwin the way that they did down the stretch, in addition to the way Evans was utilized throughout the entire season, you're still talking about one of the most deadly duos of wide receivers in the NFL. So great job by Jason Light and Mike Greenberg to get it done the way that they did. Great job by Derek Gilmore to get Mike Evans everything that he wanted. I'm going to hit the chat one more time before we get out of here. Make It All Gaming says, oh, wow. So they basically put it in a signing bonus. Well done by the front office. I don't think it was a signing bonus. I want to say somebody reported that it's actually a roster bonus, but for cap purposes, it's been allocated in the signing bonus. That was the information that I was able to find. G Vegas in the chat says NFL is going to start sending players to Oscar and Grammy post-party shows to play matchmakers. It's possible. I saw Travis Kelce and Jason Kelce at the Cavs Celtics game last night. That was wild. The only thing that would have made it more interesting is if Taylor Swift had been there. And then, of course, all the eyes of TNT would have been on her the entire time instead of on what ended up being a heartbreaking game for my son. We're not going to get into that. We don't have time, and you guys really don't care about the Celtics and the Cavs. Last one. Somebody had asked, Divis Druid said, what did Trask learn under Brady, I wonder? And ACP said he learned the skill of holding a tablet. Well, he probably didn't learn the skill of holding a tablet. He would have learned how to spike a tablet if he was learning that from Tom Brady. And look, again, I like Kyle Trask. He's not a starting caliber quarterback. The Bucs are going hard after Baker Mayfield, and you hope that they get things worked out and build off of the year that they had last year. But nothing is certain, and everything can change in the blink of an eye, especially this time of year. But that is going to do it for this episode. Please make sure that you are checking out everything going on over at BucsNation.com. Make sure you are following on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at JYarcho_Bucs. Become an insider by going to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs. Give it a shot. It's a lot of fun. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding day. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. I want to thank you so much for joining me right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.